All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you for joining us for our last webinar of the fall 2025 semester. Our spring schedule will be sent out to you very soon, so you can look forward to more webinars in the next half of the academic year. We're joining you from a very snowy and very cold Williamsburg today. I hope that your students shared some of the beautiful pictures of campus. I may be a little bit biased, but I think our campus looks the most beautiful when it's covered in snow, and hopefully they had a little bit of fun, a chance to have a break from studying for their exams. Today we're going to be discussing returning room selection, so we have the experts from Residence Life who have joined us today to give us an overview of the process, timeline, and we can answer any questions you might have about the process. This webinar will follow our traditional format. It's being recorded and will be uploaded shortly after the presentation is over. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to know as soon as that recording hits our YouTube channel, but it will be sent out a couple days via email after this presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end. I will ask that we hold all questions until the end, just so we have an opportunity for our presenters to cover all of the information, and then we will answer any questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Harriet and Laura to take us away with this presentation about returning student room selection. There we go.
Perfect. So, like Heather said, we are here to talk about returning student room selection today. Um, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Harriet Kandell. I'm the Director of Housing and Residence Life here at William and Mary.
And my name is Laura Smith. I'm the Senior Housing Coordinator here with Residence Life at William and Mary. So first people ask us, why should students live on campus? Number one, students and families tell us there's that convenience, and we hear often about the sense of community. Families like that inclusive housing cost. And we also find statistically there's an improved satisfaction with college, and students are able to develop those strong connections with faculty, and they do like those access immediately to campus resources that are often just next door.
Another piece is students living on campus is all about community. And so for students that are our first year students or returning students, students find it a lot easier to connect and feel a sense of belonging just because they're able to connect to resources easier on campus and being able to connect, being involved more easier in getting to places. It also has shown that students who are more involved are happier and more satisfied with their college experience, whether that's being involved from the residence hall, community councils to RHA, or to organizations throughout campus, knowing that we have over 500 different organizations. And then again, just our student and professional staff that are within the halls, from our resident assistants, our senior resident assistants, our community directors, our area directors, and having that support staff within the halls also.
So we do have a 2-year live-on requirement for first-year students. They are required to live in the residence halls for those first 2 years following high school graduation. So anybody who graduated in 2025, they'll live with us this year and next year. And anybody who graduates this upcoming year in 2026 will live with us this upcoming year and the following year. So people often ask, does the 2-year live-on requirement, does that apply to transfers? So for traditional transfers, it does not. But for our pathways transfers, yes, they are required to live with us that first spring semester and then the following year as well.
So some really important timelines that are coming up for room selection are general dates and deadlines. So the biggest one is January 20th, 2026, which is hard to believe is really just next month. But the housing application and the contract will go live that day. But what that means is that even though it's going live on January 20th, it doesn't mean that you have to sign in right then and there to sign your housing contract to make sure that you're in the process. Students have from January 20th through February 10th by 5 p.m. to sign a housing contract and fill out their housing application to be eligible for on-campus housing for the following year. So again, it doesn't matter when you sign your housing contract, just providing that you sign it between January 20th and February 10th by 5 p.m., that will put you in for being eligible for on-campus housing. Again, for our rising second-year students, our housing is required, and so you're guaranteed housing. And then for our rising juniors and seniors, it makes you eligible for that time. And so then also February 10th is also same room sign up. So what this means is for students who are eligible to return to the same hall and same room, And all of this is listed out on our website and in the communications that we're sending. So if you're in, for example, Hardy Hall, fourth floor, as a returning student currently, then you'll be eligible to return there next year, providing that you do same room sign up by 5 p.m. on February 10th and fill your room essentially. New students who are new this year, your halls are not eligible for returning. So if you're a student or you're a student in a first year hall, you're not eligible to return to the same hall for next year because those halls remain first year halls for our incoming students. And so then we're looking at our rising upper graduate hall. So just keep that in mind. And then February 16th is room selection, and that will all be sent via timelines. And so you'll all get a room time slot email. Um, I believe, right? This date is actually not on here. Laura, do you
It's February 12th.
February 12th. So February 12th, all students who are eligible for room selection will get an email with your assigned time slot. And so whether that is in a living learning community or a traditional time slot or early room selection, you'll get an email with your indicated time for room selection and that date. The first day of room selection will begin on February 16th. And all of that can be found on our website and is laid out by whichever category you're in. So early room selection, living learning, special interest, housing, or traditional room selection. And so that's all laid out on our room selection website.
So as we talked about before, all students who wish to live with us on campus next year must sign that housing contract and housing application by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 10th. Students who sign up by that due date and time have the best opportunity of receiving that room selection time slot. And time slots during traditional room selection week are based on high school graduation year, with rising seniors being the first to choose their rooms, followed by rising juniors and then rising sophomores.
So students who sign a housing contract late, and so that after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 10th, they'll be assigned a bed space by resident life staff, but you wouldn't be eligible for a room time slot sign up. So providing there's not an active housing wait list that we don't anticipate, but you never know. Residence life staff, so when we say that, it would be our assignments team will then assign students to open bed spaces. And so just keeping that in mind that there is a difference between signing a housing contract at 4:59 p.m. that Tuesday versus 5:05 p.m. It is that short of a window that could put you out of the running for being able to go in and select your own room space. We would prefer students to go in and select their own room space versus our assignments team putting them into a vacant spot because you have more of a chance of getting something that you would prefer versus what is left over after room selection. And again, if there is an active housing wait list at the time a student signs a housing contract, then we would just place you on the wait list at the end.
So new for 2025-26, Global Village is going to relocate from Pine Hall to Oak Hall. As noted on our same room sign up section of our website, anytime there's an adjustment to living learning communities, things like that, those places become no longer eligible for same room sign up. So just keep that in mind.
So more about the wait list. Resident Life doesn't anticipate a wait list. If we do have one, it would not be significant. I know in years past we've had over 600 plus students on a wait list. We don't anticipate that occurring. And also part of that is because we opened new residence halls this past year, but then also we have not changed anything for next year housing wise. Nothing is closing, nothing is opening, and so we don't anticipate anything to be too out of the ordinary for next year. If one does occur, though, just note that we've successfully managed this over time, and students that remained on the wait list were always assigned by late July. And so, again, if your student did end up on a wait list for some reason, providing they remained on that wait list by late July, we had housed everyone that remained. Again, it's up to students who want to make the decision of waiting or looking for a place off campus. Again, we have an entire waitlist housing page that students can look at and families can look at if they're interested in knowing more information.
So with same room sign up, as you said, it is available again this year. They may return to the same unit, the room a suite apartment, as long as their space meets those necessary requirements. That does mean that the entire unit has to be filled. So if it's just a two-person bedroom with no attached bathroom, they have to fill the room. If it's a suite, two bedrooms connected by a bathroom, they have to fill the whole suite. And same with an apartment, they would have to fill every bed space in that apartment to be able, if their space is eligible for same room sign up, for them to be able to sign up. Um, Same room sign up does have to be completed by 5 p.m. February 10th. It does start and be open and available beginning January 20th when the housing application opens. I know a lot of students are really excited about being able to return to their same space, especially if they've loved it this year. And if their roommate's leaving, they can pull somebody in as well.
So disability accommodations, this is really important. So accommodations in housing are automatically renewed each year. And so if your student had an accommodation this year for a single room, then that accommodation has remained on file for next year. And so they will automatically, providing they sign a housing contract, that is the really important piece. Providing that they sign a housing contract by our deadline for housing, then they'll be eligible to go through early room selection again for a single room. Now, if your student is needing to change their housing accommodation or add a housing accommodation, then the process for that is to be submitted to SAS, Student Accessibility Services, by February 2nd for them to be able to review accommodations and connect with students if needed. And then we would then receive a letter from SAS copied when it's going to the student for approval. And then students would be then notified of their room selection time for early room selection if they have a disability accommodation. So just keeping that in mind. Again, if your student was approved for an air conditioning accommodation, that's not added for returning student early room selection process, as all upper level halls have cooling systems. And so just keep that in mind. Returning students, again, with an approved air conditioning accommodation for this year wouldn't be in early room selection because of all of our halls having cooling systems in our upper class halls.
So for religious accommodations, requests are considered on a case-by-case basis, and those requests should be submitted with associated documentation to the Planning, Strategy, and Integrative Practices Office by February 2nd of 2026. You can access that link also from our timeline on the Residence Life website for room selection.
And I think I just want to note on the religious accommodation piece that if a student has a religious accommodation, it's based on space and availability at that time. And so just keeping that in mind as you go through room selection process. So then we have gender inclusive housing. So Residence Life is committed to offering gender inclusive housing options to all students. There is an entire page on this, but Residence Life offers the preference options for students to meet individual needs. This is also based on age, and so students have to go through the housing portal and be 18 or older, and it gives another living option on campus for students. And then on that page, I should also note that it also lists out all of our halls that are eligible for gender inclusive housing and all our halls that are not eligible, or depending on the hall, it could be by floor or by building.
One of the questions we get a lot is about, hey, I'm a sophomore, can I get a single? The honest answer is single rooms are rarely available for sophomores to select during the room selection process. Sometimes they do become available later in the academic year, and they can request a room change into a single. But they should really be concentrating on that roommate piece of trying to find somebody that they wish to room with the next year. So just please be aware that singles are very rare for sophomores.
I think it's also safe to say, like, and when we say rare, it's because out of about almost 5,000 beds, only 6% of our inventory is singles. And so when you do the math, it kind of breaks down to, I think, about just under 300 beds that are single rooms across campus. And so just keeping that in mind.
And speaking of roommates, the online process for creating roommate groups is the same as last year's housing application room selection process. It is the same for first year students and returners. Students can search for roommates based on lifestyle questionnaires, such as if they're a morning or an evening person, if they like quiet or music when they study, how often they have guests, level of cleanliness. A Roommate Connect Social is scheduled and sponsored by RHA. It's scheduled for Tuesday, February 17th in the evening. And we really want folks to know that we have found that the questions that are there in the lifestyle questionnaire. And also, there's some fun questions too at the Roommate Connect, are great ways to really match folks to see if they would be compatible, and it really starts those great conversations. Students who do not go through room selection with a pre-planned roommate, they will be able to make a selection in the late afternoon of their traditional room selection day, and they'll receive a roommate. And if for some reason it just doesn't feel like it's working out, that room change request form process is still available. But we do find if people really start now looking for those roommate groups, um, they have the best opportunity to find somebody beforehand that matches the same way that they live.
So then we have off-campus process. So we always like to touch on this for our returning students who are going to be rising juniors and seniors, because again, our second year students are going to be living with us on campus next year. But for our rising juniors and seniors, we have a couple of things on here just to talk about the process for if you're looking for off-campus or you're kind of weighing your options between on-campus or off-campus. Beginning your search, it's really important to talk about budget, renter's insurance, utilities. Some core considerations that we always talk about is safety and security, area transportation, groceries and meal access and what that looks like. Whether you're going to be cooking all of your meals all the time or if you're going to get a commuter meal plan. We also stress about rights and responsibilities. And so looking at when you're signing a lease off campus, what are you signing? And just being really vigilant about the terms and conditions of a housing contract or a lease off campus and what that means. And also just stressing on that too for us. Make sure that you read our housing contract also in the cancellation process, because I know that some students, when they're a rising junior or senior, they kind of sign the housing contract and then think about living off campus. And so make sure that you're canceling that housing contract prior to the deadlines. Because once our deadlines pass, you're kind of locked in for on-campus housing with that housing contract. And so just being really aware of your rights and responsibilities of anything that you sign, and keeping that in mind. And then staying engaged, so personal info questionnaires, staying engaged with university events. So if you do move off campus, just making sure that you're staying connected to the on-campus community and being aware of the events that are happening on campus. The William and Mary News, the mobile app is really important, and then just being connected. So just thinking of those things.
A great place to jump off for the off-campus search is at the website wmoffcampus.com. It is powered by off-campus partners. Most of the properties there are located within a reasonable driving distance, and listings do vary from houses to homes, and there's flexible search options like move-in dates. We really encourage folks, if they're considering off-campus, those rising juniors and seniors, that they look there as that jumping off piece, as they're also considering the items shared previously about off-campus housing.
I also encourage students that are looking at off-campus options to connect with other students who are off campus too about like, is it a good place to live? Like, did you enjoy in said apartment complex? Those are just things to keep in mind as you're looking, whether your student is looking or you're looking for your student, just being vigilant on that. But also just keeping in mind too, like once a student moves off campus, residence life doesn't really have any oversight of any off-campus housing, because we do get calls once in a while about my student needs help with their roommate situation or these things are happening off campus with our tenant. But unfortunately, those are things that we can't help with necessarily just because it's not on campus housing. And then we are again connected with our STEP office. They do a fantastic job of hosting a off-campus education and housing fair. They've done one already this fall, back in October, and there'll be another one in the spring, typically between February and March. And there is tabling, and the great thing about this is that if your students are contemplating whether living on or off campus, they can go and connect with off-campus resources from property management representatives. There's also campus resources there, such as financial aid and how does my financial aid work on campus versus off-campus apartments, and how does that all work together. Local resources are also there. And so just keeping that in mind as an option too in the spring.
anybody has any questions after this presentation today about room selection, we encourage folks to email myroom@wm.edu. And if folks have specific questions about the off-campus housing fairs, they can reach out to our STEP office at step@wm.edu.
All right, I have went ahead and opened the Q&A. So for any of our attendees on the webinar, now is a great time to submit those questions that you have for our two representatives from Residence Life. And I'll give it just a second for some of those questions to come in. Okay, I do have a question about what happens if you anticipate your student is studying abroad in the spring, or let's do both the spring and maybe they anticipate studying abroad next fall. What are the processes for both of those?
That's a great question. For students who are contemplating studying away in the fall, we'll start there. We do encourage them to go ahead and go through the room selection process as though they weren't. That way, if their program falls through, they will have already secured on-campus housing. And then if they do get to go through with their program, we will release them from their housing contract without penalty. Once we're able to verify that program. A lot of students find a lot of comfort in that and want to let them know that that option is available. If they do end up doing a spring study away, what they'll do is they'll go through room selection just as though they were not going to do a spring study away, and they'll move into that spot for the fall. And then if they do find that their program for the spring is going to go ahead, beginning of November, they can go back into their housing application and request a spring study away contract release. And then we would void that spring portion of their contract without penalty as well. So that they can go on their program without worrying about having to pay for on-campus housing.
Thank you. I've got two questions here, both about roommate group sizes. So, what are the roommate group sizes that will participate in returning room selection? Two, three, four? What's the number?
So depending on where they're looking at assigning to, right? And so our suites are typically 4 people. And so it would be a roommate group of 4, or a apartment in Tribe Square is a roommate group of 4. It really depends on where you're looking, because in Landrum, we do have a couple of suites on the top floor, on the fourth floor, where it is 6. And so it's 3 to one side and 3 to the other side. And so if there were a group of 6 that were wanting to go into a suite there, and let's say the suite was all full by the time they got to their room slot time, then they would have to break up their group into a 4 and a 2, or 2, 2, and 2. And so it really depends on the group and what they're looking for and what's available at the time of their room selection time slot.
Hey, getting lots of good questions here. If a student stays in the same room next year, can they leave their belongings in the room over the summer?
That is a great question, and we always get that question. But unfortunately, students are unable to leave their items over the summer. And part of that is because the buildings are used for summer conferences and events, but also summer housing. And then also, we close some buildings that need maintenance. And so we don't want students' belongings in rooms while those things are happening. So in May, students will have to pack up all of their belongings and take them home for the summer. Or there are options that we'll also share out over the spring, where students can opt in for, I think we use dorm movers that essentially
Yes.
they'll send them the boxes and students will pack up the items, and then they'll actually come pick up the items from the room, and then bring them back in the fall for students. So there's a couple of different storage options. They just can't leave it in the residence halls over the summer.
Okay. My student transitioned off-campus housing for junior year, but is contemplating coming back to on-campus housing for the upcoming senior year. Is the process the same? And what is the process to apply for a single?
So the
The
process is the same
Yeah.
as it is for other students, and there's no penalty for having lived off the year before. Regarding a single, uh, if they go in during the room selection time slot and there's still single available, they can go ahead and select it. Um, there's no special process to request one. It is really based on that availability during traditional room selection.
Let's see here. We've got a question about, got two questions about kind of the order in which students select their room, or what what their time slot assignment is for returning room selection. Wondering if it's seniors, then juniors, then sophomores, or kind of is it algorithm based? How are the decisions made about when time slots occur?
So it is based on their social class initially. So rising seniors go first, rising juniors, and then rising sophomores. And within that, it's based on their high school graduation year. And so once those things are identified, everything else is randomized within those groups.
And then that would kind of, anyone who has any type of early selection would occur before that, correct?
Correct. The early selections occur the week before.
We have a good question here. My understanding from Student Accessibility Services was that accommodation requests need to be renewed each year. It seems that the presentation says that that's not necessary for housing accommodations. Would you mind clarifying that?
Sure. In the past, they did need to be renewed every year. After discussion with them this past year, it has been updated that students do not need to renew for the room selection process.
Yeah, that's a good catch. It is a small change in the process from maybe what we were preparing you for or what we may have discussed during previous webinars. Okay, if a student has a single room accommodation, when they go to select a room, will they only see singles as their options and vice versa, or will they be able to see all rooms that are available?
So students will only be able to, during early room selection, select from rooms that specifically meet their specific approved housing accommodations. So they will not see every room that is out there. They'll only see there what they are specifically approved for. And if they don't want to select what they're specifically approved for, they can forego their accommodation and request their traditional room selection time slot. But we can't guarantee that they'll be able to select in something that they would more prefer nor something that would meet their approved housing accommodations through traditional room selection.
Another great question. Is there a website where we can look at which rooms meet our students' accommodations while we're at home over break?
So we don't have any specific sort of algorithm or function for folks to do that. We would encourage them to go through our building pages to kind of look and see what kind of inventory is out there. If they have specific questions, they are welcome to reach out to us. If they email myroom@wm.edu, that would be the most expedient way to get a hold of our staff and they can take a look. Please keep in mind though, they can only speak in general locations. They can't speak about specific rooms because the room may be allocated to another student before a student's time slot. So we do encourage students to have plans A through Z going into room selection in case their most preferred rooms or locations are not available.
My son is planning on living in a fraternity house next year, which is considered on campus. How does he go about that when he signs the housing contract?
That's a fantastic question. So our fraternities and sororities, they work with us to fill those houses. And when the students, they fill out their housing contracts, they'll work on joining that roommate group for their chapter. So say a fraternity house has 17 students, that chapter president and group is working on getting 17 people inside that roommate group. And then we work with their roommate group leader to make that selection at the end of early selection week.
Are roommate groups of 3 or 4 allowed to be co-ed?
So they can be if they are uh, wanting to do gender inclusive housing into a gender inclusive housing eligible location. Please keep in mind, roommate groups of 3 are going to be very limited as we have very limited number of 3-person units on campus. But yes, those can be gender inclusive eligible.
Do you happen to know, Laura or Harriet, what percent of students live on campus through their senior year?
In full transparency, I don't think we've actually ran that number in recent years with all the changes we've had to on-campus housing. I think this year will actually be our new base set year. And so we probably actually won't have that number officially by until the end of this year. We've had so many changes to housing in the last 5 years that this year is kind of our new baseline year. So off the top of my head, I don't think I could give you an accurate answer to that unless Laura has done the math recently.
I've not done the math on that specifically, but we do have about 65% of undergraduates live on campus at this time.
Thank you. This is a very specific logistical question. How many minutes do students have to choose their room when their time slot opens?
I love that question. So they have from the moment their time slot opens until 5 o'clock the same day to make a selection. So I know a lot of people panic, like I only have 15 minutes to make a selection. No, you have from that time slot opening until 5 o'clock that same day. Um, and everybody's time slots have already opened by 3:30, so they have at least an hour and a half to make that
Now,
selection.
it does time out though if you have put a room in your
Correct.
shopping basket, essentially. I think it's after 15 minutes that it times out in the basket. So if you haven't
Yes.
assigned everyone to the bed within that time frame, then it times out on you. But as far as you being in the portal and being able to see what's available, that does the timeout.
Someone did ask, I'm curious about the chances of a senior without an accommodation getting a single room. After all accommodations are taken care of, how many of those 300-ish single rooms are left available for seniors? And they acknowledge, I know this won't be exact, so feel free to use any past data.
It changes every year, so it'll depend on how many students with accommodations do same room sign up and go through the accommodation process. It really is like luck of the draw when you sign in at your time slot. I would say if your student gets a time slot that's later in the day, then most likely there won't be any singles left. If they have an earlier time slot in the day, then there could be maybe a dozen. It just really depends on what's available at that time.
Yeah, hard number to gauge.
Yeah,
Different students have different needs every year during the room selection process.
they
So
do.
that one really is a luck of the draw
They do.
situation. For juniors and seniors, is housing available on campus if they want to stay living on campus, or is there some sort of lottery? Are they guaranteed housing at this point?
So we do not guarantee housing for juniors and seniors, but we have roughly, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, about 600 juniors and maybe 600-ish seniors on campus this year. It really depends on the year and how
Right.
many returners. But we know we have over 1,000, combined over 1,000 junior and seniors living on campus with us, but it is not guaranteed.
Yeah. And while it's not guaranteed, if we do have more juniors and seniors apply, then we have space on campus during room selection. People should be have or should have comfort in the fact that even when we've had wait list of 500, 600 students, everybody who stayed on that wait list was able to secure housing by late July. And so we've actually opened with vacancies every year that we've had a wait list. So just really encourage folks if they do want to live on campus to go ahead and engage with the process with us.
Yep.
All right, a good technical question around the fraternity and sorority life housing. What if your student joins one of those organizations in the spring and decides they want to live in the house for the next year?
So if they are not part of that initial roommate group that the chapter has to secure the house for the following year, they should definitely approach their chapter president and let them know they would like to be on the chapter wait list to come to live in the house. Uh, Chapters, we encourage them to have wait lists every year because we know there's going to be people who may transfer, people who do study away, people who have a medical emergency. And it really helps those chapters to have that wait list of folks who are living on campus that they can just slot them right in to move into the housing, into the chapter house. Chapter houses do have a penalty for not filling their houses. And so that wait list is super important. But we're always excited about chapters that have those wait lists for sure.
Good information to have. A follow-up to that, does the information that you've shared so far about on-campus fraternity and sorority housing also apply to any housing for other activities? Is there an easy way for us families to know if an activity house, for example, fencing, is considered on or off campus?
The fencing is not an on-campus housing. I can tell you that is definitely off-campus. So residence life houses fraternity and sororities, the Global Village, which is our living language houses, Africana House, Mosaic House, our Sharp and Monroe Scholars, which are our first year students, But we don't house any other activities outside of that unless it's been an approved living learning community or special interest housing. And you can see what is listed on our website is all up to date and accurate. And so that will also give you kind of guidance if it's an approved on-campus house. But again, those are our only facilities that are housed on campus.
Yep. And all of the residence halls are listed on the Residence Life page, and you can look at all of those halls. If your student is discussing a house that maybe doesn't share an address or name of any of the houses or residence halls listed on Residence Life's page, there is a really strong chance that that is an off-campus residence. If they're signing a lease as opposed to navigating the housing contract process, that is an off-campus house. Just to clarify, that would be, I think, if I was approaching it, if my student's talking about living in a house that's insert activity here, address that seems to be off campus, they're needing to sign an individual lease or a group lease and not necessarily the housing contract. That would indicate it's an off campus house. Okay. Are there room selection time slots during class times?
They are during class times. Since they are randomized, we don't look at the specific class time. If they are in a roommate group and they want to look at, making sure if somebody has a class that they don't want to step out for a minute, that they make another person in their group, the roommate group leader. If um, they have concerns that are they're not sure how to go around or how to work with their time slot, they're more than welcome to reach out to us at my room, and we'll chat with them about options. But typically, professors know going through that week of the year that students are selecting housing and have been pretty gracious about letting students have a minute to go ahead and make that selection.
For off-campus students with a car, how does the parking on campus work?
So parking is a completely separate office from us. And so parking and transportation, students would be able to go online and request a on-campus commuter parking. So that is something that is all done through that office. And their website is all up to date on that information also. And then just keeping in mind, if you're a returning student and it's going to be your second year on campus, you're still not allowed to have a car on campus. But if you're going to be a junior and senior, you would be able to have a car on campus, or if you're commuting junior and senior.
What is the best way to identify if a room is a single or not on a floor plan on the Residence Life page?
The majority of our buildings do have a layout PDF that they can look at to see if things are singles or doubles. Some of our newer buildings don't have those so much because those are not ready and available yet. But we do encourage students to first look at like the kind of neighborhood they want to live in and identify buildings that way. And then as they're making selection, just work their way from the top down. And if what they're looking for is not available at the time of their selection, just move on to the next A, B, C, D part of their list.
Let's see here. Does the roommate group get assigned a time slot, or does each individual in the roommate group have their own time slot and they use the earliest one?
So that second one there is how it works. Everybody receives their own room selection time slot, and we do encourage groups to make sure that that person with the earliest time slot becomes a roommate group leader, and they can make that adjustment on the roommate group page in the housing application. And we always recommend that earliest time slot person be the roommate group leader because that way the group has more choices of what's available when their time slot opens to make a selection.
That took care of a few of our questions there. My son will be starting his sophomore year this January. Since he'll still be a sophomore next fall, but only for half of the year, what would happen when he becomes a junior halfway through next year since housing isn't guaranteed in junior year?
So it's based on high school graduation. And so if you look at our website, so if your student graduated in spring of 25, then they are guaranteed housing for next year. And so it's based on that high school graduation date for guaranteed on-campus housing. It's when you graduated high school, and then came into William and Mary in that same year. So if they graduated in May of 24, then they wouldn't be guaranteed housing for next year because that is what we're looking at that class designation and coming through based on high school graduation year.
Okay. And then I think maybe a follow-up to that question being, however, though, if they sign the housing contract for like that full academic year and they have that room for the full academic year, just because they're not guaranteed that housing doesn't mean that they're going to have to make a change halfway through the year, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not looking at it. We're looking at it from that high school graduation. So if they sign up for their housing and they'll be there for all of next year academic year.
Wonderful. Okay, Harriet, Laura, a first in this family engagement webinar endeavor that I've been on for years. We have no more open questions. So I am going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you so much, Harriet and
Okay.
Laura, for spending some time with us. That tells me your presentation was very informative, which I know it was. And this was recorded and will be shared with all families a little bit later today or tomorrow. Thanks for spending some time with us on this half snow day that we have here, and best wishes to everyone and happy holidays as we round out this fall semester. Bye, everyone.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.